Will the Buckeyes finally wake up? Maybe the cold in East Lansing will do the trick. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, teaming up with SG1 Sports to bring you college football previews and predictions. Week 11 and a key matchup in the Big Ten Conference as Ohio State keeps its hopes alive, facing Michigan State. The Buckeyes the only threat to Michigan in the Big Ten Eastern Division. This has been a game in which, down through history, Michigan State has been a thorn in the side of Ohio State football. So even pre-Mark D'Antonio, Michigan State, basically a 500 team for decades in the Big Ten, but have tagged the Buckeyes with some big losses, most notably the one in 1998 when Nick Saban finished with a 6-5 Michigan State team, but it was good enough to beat Ohio State, a number one team in Columbus, 28-24, that derailed the Buckeyes' national championship hopes. That team finished number 2 in the nation, probably the best team in the country, but lost to Michigan State in a heartbreaker. Since Urban Meyer arrived, two of his big losses against Michigan State go back to 2013. Ohio State had won 24 consecutive games. They faced Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game, had come back from 17 down to take a 24-17 lead. Michigan State scored the final 17 to knock off Ohio State, deny the Buckeyes not only the Big Ten title, but a trip to the BCS championship game against Florida State. Move it ahead to 2015. Ohio State consensus number 1 most of the season. NFL-laden rosters they typically have, but maybe the best draft class in history, playing as juniors and seniors. Lost on a rainy day in Columbus to Michigan State on a last-second field goal, sending Michigan State to the college football playoffs, while the Buckeyes still finished 12-1 and number 3 in the country with a great lineup. Even in 2016, when Sparty finished 3-9, they gave the Buckeyes a scare en route to a college football playoff appearance, 17-16 in East Lansing, when Mark D'Antonio said, "What the heck?" and went for 2 and the win in the final minute, but the Buckeyes held on 17-16. Last year was the aberration. The Buckeyes, hurting off of that loss, the infamous loss at Iowa, came back to Columbus and knocked off what finished as a top 15, 10-3 Michigan State team, 48-3. J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber went off in that game for 286 yards rushing. Well, the same duo got it going for the first time pretty much the entire season last week against Nebraska and Columbus. J.K. ran for 163, Mike Weber, 9 carries, 91 yards, 254 yards rushing out of the Buckeyes' 2 big backs as they committed themselves to the run. Well, Nebraska is the 70th ranked rush defense in the nation. Michigan State's number 1. We'll see how Ohio State's revamped rushing attack attacks Sparty. Urban Meyer said in his news conference that one of the big keys to getting those 2 guys loose was changing the schematics of the blocking schemes, and that they were able to find some answers. We'll see if they can do it against a good defense. Dwayne Haskins, of course, having still a remarkable season, 70% completion percentage, 32 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, but did have his worst game against Nebraska, missing on 14 throws and 32 attempts, and he was erratic all day. Not too many drops in that, just erratic, high on his throws. Off target, bad red zone interception, misread it, misthrew it as well. But obviously having a tremendous season, but we'll have to be back on his game on the road at Michigan State. All right, Ohio State started the season 6 deep at wide receiver, 5 seniors, and Benjamin Victor included. The 2 guys that have really stepped up in terms of week-to-week production, Paris Campbell, who's been a game changer for the Buckeyes this season, 56 catches, 8 touchdowns. He can burn any defense. Check out last year's Big Ten championship game. KJ Hill, more underneath stuff as the slot receiver, 51 catches. Johnny Dixon, he's another burner, had a big game against Nebraska, especially in the first half. Terry McLaurin has 8 touchdowns. So they've got a lot of guys that can hurt you as wide receivers, none of them superstars. Austin Mack out for the season. All right, on the Michigan State side offensively, you got Brian Lewerke or Rocky Lombardi. Of course, Lewerke's the guy that led Sparty back from 3-9 to the 10-3 finish last year, but just not having a good season this year. 8 touchdowns, 8 picks, 56% completion percentage. He does provide mobility, but he's had a bum shoulder the last few weeks. It resulted against a Michigan defense that had a lot to do with both the bum shoulder and the 5 for 25 performance. Ben Lewerke was out for a week. He came back against Maryland last week. It didn't look great in throwing for less than 100 yards, 11 for 20 passing. Lombardi's a freshman from Iowa. He's got a red shirt under his belt. The 13th rated dual threat quarterback coming out of high school in 2017. And he played well against Purdue in that upset win at home, 318 yards and 2 touchdowns. But D'Antonio says he's going to stay with Brian Lewerke. Either quarterback will need a rushing attack, and Michigan State starting finally to show signs of being able to consistently move the ball on the ground. Last week it was Connor Hayward against Maryland for 157 yards rushing. The best back, though, that they have is, of course, the senior L.J. Scott, who's had a strong career at Michigan State. Unfortunately for him, a weak finish as he has been hurt all season. He's questionable for the Ohio State game. He was out against Maryland with a leg injury. Injuries at wide receiver as well. They came into the Penn State game missing 3 of their top 5. They lost Felton Davis for the season, and Davis, the best wide receiver of the group, gone for the season. Darrell Stewart, Cody White, those are going to be the 2 guys that are most likely going to have to step up against Ohio State and make the big plays downfield. Against an Ohio State secondary that's underachieved, it's also been banged up as well. We're at that point of the season when coaches just hope. They know that they'll have injuries, but just don't hit one particular unit on the field. For Ohio State, it's been secondary. Jeffrey Okudah, one of their best cornerbacks, could not make the Nebraska game. He's supposed to be back for this one. In the absence of Jordan Fuller, really their leader in the secondary, the safety that leads the Buckeyes in tackles, he was thrown out of the game in the first half due to targeting, so he'll be back. But the Buckeyes found a nice complement player here in Brendan White, who came into the game against Nebraska only with 5 tackles on the entire season, filled in for Fuller, and had 13 tackles and a remarkable game. Isaiah Pryor also needs to be back in the lineup for Ohio State. All right, if we're just measuring talent here, it's not even close. We saw in Columbus what can happen when Ohio State's hitting on all cylinders and Michigan State plays maybe a C game. Ohio State's a team that could potentially just run away with this game. But in the dreary, cold East Lansing setting at Spartans Stadium against this Michigan State team that Mark D'Antonio said after the Maryland game remembers what happened in Columbus, the top 5 talent against the top 25 talent won't necessarily matter. Even though the Buckeyes are the team that's playing for a championship, and Michigan State, in a sense, got their bowl eligibility win last week, just playing out the string. This is an experienced bunch. So it's seniors wanting to get revenge, finish out the season, finish strong against a Buckeyes team that's pretty young in most areas. The only negative here for Michigan State is if they win, they basically gift-wrapped the Big Ten championship for Michigan. That's the only thing that they wouldn't like right there. The Football Power Index typically likes Ohio State in this game by 75-80%. This year it's 60-40. Let's go for a hunch here. Ohio State, yes, the talent advantage by a lot. Michigan State is playing so much better football. They know who they are. They know what they are. Look at the Maryland box score. They know what they do. They know what they need to do. They've gotten back to running the football. Ohio State, yes, they ran the football against Nebraska. I've got to see it against Michigan State. Yes, this team is still dangerous. They could beat anybody in the country if they would get it all together. They have yet to do that in 9 games. Yes, they're 8-1 and playing for a championship. But take Michigan State to beat Ohio State in East Lansing, 23-21. That's my pick here at Mark Rogers TV and SD1 Sports. Keep it locked in here as we would love to see your prediction on the Buckeyes and the Spartans. We'll be back with more predictions. Chris will be providing previews and predictions throughout the week, primarily on the SEC, but the entire nation as well, right here at SD1 Sports. Join me at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football as well. A big live stream at 7 o'clock Eastern time on Wednesday night as we prep you for Week 11 and all the huge matchups involving all the top teams across the country, college football playoff scenarios, and we will, of course, be analyzing the selections of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee that come out on Tuesday night, right here at SD1 Sports and Mark Rogers TV.